On the morning of 7 October 1571, the waters of the Gulf of Patras turned red. Before the sun fully rose over the mountains of western Greece, more than 400 warships drifted into formation. Oars dipped into the sea, drums thundered across the waves, priests whispered prayers, cannons waited in silence. By sunset, the balance of power in the Mediterranean would change forever. This was the Battle of Lepanto, one of the largest naval clashes in human history, a battle that pitted the rising might of the Ottoman Empire against a desperate Christian coalition known as the Holy League. It was a collision of empires, faiths, and destinies, and it nearly decided who would rule the sea. The Mediterranean on the brink. To understand Lepanto, we must return decades before that October morning. By the mid-16th century, the Ottoman Empire dominated vast territories stretching from Anatolia to North Africa and deep into southeastern Europe. Under Suleiman the Magnificent, the empire had reached its zenith. His armies crushed Hungary at the Battle of Mohács in 1526, besieged Vienna in 1529, and secured dominance across the eastern Mediterranean. The Ottoman navy, commanded by legendary admirals like Hayreddin Barbarossa, shattered Christian fleets at the Battle of Preveza in 1538, giving Istanbul control of key sea routes. For decades, European powers watched helplessly as Ottoman galleys prowled the Mediterranean, raiding coasts, capturing islands, and threatening trade. But by 1566, Suleiman was dead. His successor, Selim II, lacked his father's battlefield brilliance. Yet he had ambition and one particular target in mind: Cyprus. The spark. The Fall of Cyprus, 1570 to 1571. In July 1570, the Ottomans launched a massive invasion of Cyprus, then controlled by the Republic of Venice. The island was strategically crucial, a gateway between Anatolia, the Levant, and Europe. The siege of Nicosia began in July 1570. After brutal fighting, the city fell in September. Thousands were killed. The Venetian stronghold of Famagusta held out longer under the heroic defense of Marcantione Bragadin. For nearly a year, Famagusta resisted. Finally, on 1 August 1571, the city surrendered under promises of safe passage, but those promises were broken. Bragadin was tortured and executed in a brutal spectacle that shocked Europe. News of the massacre spread like wildfire. It ignited fury. The Holy League forms, 1571. In response, Pope Pius V worked tirelessly to unite Europe's divided powers. For decades, Christian states had fought each other more than the Ottomans. Rivalries between Spain and Venice, distrust among Italian states, unity seemed impossible. But Cyprus changed everything. In May 1571, the Holy League was formed, a military alliance between the Kingdom of Spain, the Republic of Venice, and the Papal States. Spain's young and ambitious commander, Don John of Austria, half-brother of King Philip II, was appointed supreme commander of the fleet. He was only 24 years old. Opposing him would be the experienced Ottoman admiral Ali Pasha, commanding one of the most formidable naval forces ever assembled. The stage was set. The fleets assemble. By late September 1571, the Holy League fleet gathered at Messina in Sicily. Their force included approximately 206 galleys, 6 massive galleasses, Venetian heavy gunships, around 28,000 soldiers, 12,000 sailors, 43,000 oarsmen. Among the fighters was a young Spanish soldier named Miguel de Cervantes, who later wrote Don Quixote. At Lepanto, he fought bravely and was wounded in the chest and left hand, a wound that permanently crippled him. Meanwhile, the Ottoman fleet gathered at Lepanto, modern Naupactos. They brought approximately 230 galleys, 56 galleots, around 34,000 soldiers, tens of thousands of sailors and rowers. They were confident. For decades, they had rarely been defeated at sea. Neither side intended to retreat. Dawn of October 7th, 1571. The two fleets met near the Gulf of Patras, off western Greece. The sky was calm. The sea was deceptively peaceful. Both fleets formed traditional battle lines. The Holy League split into 4 divisions: left, center, right, and reserve. The Ottomans mirrored them with similar formations. On the Christian left wing stood Venetian commander Agostino Barbarigo. On the right wing stood the seasoned Genoese admiral Giovanni Andrea Doria. In the center stood Don John of Austria himself aboard the flagship Real. Behind them, in reserve, stood Alvaro de Bazan. Across the water, Ali Pasha commanded from the Ottoman flagship Sultana. The drums began. The first clash. The battle opened with the Venetian galleasses, floating fortresses armed with heavy cannons. As the Ottoman fleet advanced, these massive ships unleashed devastating broadsides. Explosions tore through Ottoman galleys, wood splintered, men screamed. It was the first time in Mediterranean naval warfare that heavy artillery played such a decisive opening role. But the Ottomans pressed forward. Soon, ships crashed into each other, grappling hooks flew, soldiers leapt across decks. The battle became hand-to-hand combat. Chaos in the center. In the center, the Real and the Sultana collided. Ali Pasha's elite Janissaries stormed Don John's flagship. For nearly an hour, brutal fighting raged on deck. Swords clashed, arquebuses fired, blood ran between the planks. Twice the Ottomans nearly overran the Real. Twice they were pushed back. Finally, Spanish reinforcements boarded the Sultana. Ali Pasha was shot and killed. His head was raised on a pike. When Ottoman sailors saw their commander dead, panic began to spread. Crisis on the flanks. On the Christian left, Barbarigo was struck in the eye by an arrow and later died from his wound, but Venetian forces held firm. On the Christian right, things nearly collapsed. Giovanni Andrea Doria maneuvered south to avoid being outflanked, but this created a dangerous gap in the Christian line. Ottoman Admiral Uluk Ali seized the opportunity and broke through, capturing several ships. For a moment, victory seemed possible for the Ottomans. But Alvaro de Bazan's reserve forces intervened at a critical moment, sealing the breach and surrounding Uluk Ali's ships. The tide had turned. By sunset. After nearly 5 hours of relentless combat, the Ottoman fleet was shattered. Estimates suggest over 30,000 Ottoman casualties, around 200 ships captured or destroyed, approximately 12,000 Christian galley slaves freed. The Holy League suffered heavy losses as well, around 7,500 to 8,000 dead, roughly 20 ships lost. But it was a decisive victory. For the first time in decades, the Ottoman Navy had suffered catastrophic defeat in open battle. The myth of Ottoman naval invincibility was broken. The aftermath. The victory electrified Europe. Church bells rang from Rome to Madrid. Pope Pius V reportedly credited the Virgin Mary and established 7th October as the feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. Yet, strategically, the consequences were more complex. Within a year, the Ottomans rebuilt much of their fleet. By 1572, they had launched over 150 new galleys. But something had changed. The psychological balance of power shifted. No longer unstoppable, the Ottoman Empire was now seen as vulnerable. The human cost. Lepanto was brutal even by 16th century standards. Thousands drowned when shattered galleys sank. Rowers, many of them slaves, were chained to benches with no chance of escape. Bodies floated for miles. Miguel de Cervantes later called Lepanto the highest occasion that past centuries have seen. But for those who survived, it was a nightmare etched into memory. Why Lepanto mattered. Historians debate its long-term strategic impact. Did it halt Ottoman expansion? Did it save Europe from invasion? Perhaps not permanently, but it proved something critical. The Ottomans could be defeated at sea. Naval warfare was evolving. Heavy artillery and disciplined infantry would reshape battles. The age of the galley was slowly fading. Lepanto marked both the peak and the beginning of the end for Mediterranean galley warfare. The legacy. The battle has echoed through art, literature, and legend for centuries. Paintings, poems, and churches memorialized it. Miguel de Cervantes carried its scars into literary immortality. European identity hardened around the narrative of resistance, and yet the Mediterranean remained contested. The struggle between empires continued for generations. But on that October day in 1571, the course of history shifted. Final reflection. Imagine the silence after the cannon stopped, smoke drifting over broken ships, the cries of wounded men fading into the sea wind. More than 40,000 lives were lost or shattered in a single day. The Battle of Lepanto was not just a clash of fleets. It was a clash of civilizations, ambitions, faiths, and futures. And for 5 violent hours on October 7th, 1571, the fate of the Mediterranean hung in the balance. When the sun set, the sea carried the memory, and history was never the same again.